Um, Welcome. Thank you for coming to the Contemporary this afternoon. And I am very happy to be here, joined by the two artists who have presented here a beautiful exhibition and a special extra guest that has joined us from New York, Bob Nickas. Without going on too much with an introduction, I just would like to, again, thank everyone for being here, make sure everyone has a look through the exhibition. So what is on view at the Contemporary, in case people were not here last night, is a two-person exhibition between John Armleder, who's seated here in the middle, and Olivier Mosset, who's seated at the far end. And they have come together and conceived together this two-part show. We're sitting in front of a brand new installation by John Armleder, a new painting, a wall painting, in addition to new, never before seen paintings. Olivier's work is in the large space with the Toblerone sculptures and the circle paintings. And then there's another room back there with John's work that I encourage everyone to see. It's been a inspired few weeks and few months of kind of working through how this was all coming together, and I'm very honored that both artists were so involved and really kind of sank their teeth into this project, and it's been great to have them here in St. Louis. And so today, Bob Nickas is a writer, a curator, who has been living in New York for 20 years or more, and has worked on several occasions over the past many years with both John and Olivier in a variety of different projects, a variety of different exhibitions over the course of many years. So he brings to this conversation a kind of, not only do John and Olivier themselves have many years of friendship, but Bob kind of joins on to that as someone who has known both artists for a long time and has worked with them for a long time, and so can really add depth to this conversation as a third friend being added to the conversation. So without further ado, here's Bob Nickas.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks for coming today. I want to start off, John and Olivier, as Anthony said, have known each other for a long time, and they've been friends, and they've had exhibitions together, and they've even made some works together, skateboard ramp, as a collaborative work. The earliest work in the show, there is brand new work, as Anthony said, that was made for the exhibition, but the earliest work in the show are the circle paintings in the room behind us that Olivier made, and the earliest ones there from 1969 and 1970. John, I want to ask you, when was the first time that you became aware of Olivier's work? Because it could be before you met him, you could have seen it in an exhibition or a book. When was that?
I saw Olivier, is that 65, 66 in Paris, when you were putting up the banner with the BMPT group and not showing you. I think we have to be very licking those things. Oops. Yeah, so that was in Paris at the Salon des Indépendants, something like that, or?
Salon de la Jeune Peinture, 66, December 66.
Yeah, so I went...
January 67, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so it must have been cold. So I was there to see the show, and I noticed that there was these guys, I mean, everyone had like to install the work and so on, and there was these guys sort of lingering around and trying to paste up a banner, and there were supposed to be 4 of them, and one was really working, and it was Olivier, and he was pasting up this banner. And I thought, at least now I've seen a working artist, and that's maybe what I should be doing. Although I'm a kind of a lazy guy, so I didn't take that inspiration for long. Then and of course I'm a shy person, so I didn't introduce myself. But years later, with a few friends, we had this artist cooperative in Geneva called ECA, and in the 70s, Olivier came to visit us, and we decided on doing a show, which took place in the 75, was it, or something like that. Mm-hmm.
So the first work you would have seen was a circle painting?
Yeah, but in that show, they didn't show any work. They just posted up a banner saying that they were not exhibiting. It was a banner saying Hubermann, Mosset, Toroni. Is that the right order? Not exactly. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not showing, and that's what I saw. The first work I saw of Olivier was a banner saying he was not showing.
But then you did see. You would have seen paintings, encountered them later. Do you remember your reaction the first time you did see actual paintings?
No. Do you remember the reactions of
Would you make
works?
something up?
I could make something up, yeah. I said, I thought, I know what I thought. It's what I should have been saying today when we didn't do what we were supposed to do. It was wow, and what else? There's
Seeing the arch.
Yeah, there's a banner that says what you should be exclaiming when you go up, you ride up the arch, and that's the kind of things I said.
So now, Olivier, when would you say you first, not necessarily met John, but encountered his work?
I think, first of all, I think this little history that we just talked about is a little bit confusing. I might want to explain exactly what happened. So there was, in Paris at the time, you had this different yearly show that were called Salons, and there's one which was called the Salon de la Jeune Peinture, and they were mostly, at the time, inspired pop figurative works, and they were controlled by these artists. But somehow we were invited, well, this is the story. I was working at the time with 4 other artists that I met before all this, and we were doing this kind of minimal type of painting. So Buren, who's maybe you may know about, was doing this using already striped canvas, and was painting the 2 last stripe in white. There's somebody named Parmentier who would fold his painting, and he had large band, horizontal band, and there's somebody else named Turoni who was just making imprints of brush strokes at the same distance on one canvas. So we met for almost, I guess, 6 months or a year, and had this discussion, about our work, which was at the time, well, we were the only one working that kind of direction in France, in Paris. And then we got this idea that eventually we should try to show our work, but at the same time we were pretty, I guess, a little bit arrogant about everything that was happening, and we felt that we were doing something that was not what other people were doing, and these are the 60s, so we had this kind of attitude, and we got invited to that salon, but decided we're not going to show there. But what we did, we painted our paintings at the opening, so people could see that it was kind of easy to do, everybody could do that. And then we had this banner, and we also had, we were pretty arrogant. We had a tape saying, Buren, Mosset, Parmentier, Toroni advise you to be intelligent. And we had a leaflet saying, well, with painting is to play with colors or to express feelings, or we are not painter. And at the end, we took our paintings out and had this banner saying, we're not showing here. And so that was and John was there. I'm sorry I didn't see him at the time. I guess I was busy because we were painting our paintings in public. And then I guess I heard about John had a little artist-run space in Geneva. And I guess we had friends, had common friends. And somebody mentioned that. And of course I had left Switzerland early and was living in Paris, but I still, still Swiss, and it was interesting. I had always the feeling that nothing was happening in Switzerland, but it was not totally correct, because in Geneva you had actually these people doing things that were really very progressive or advanced. And so I was interested in that, and I don't know, somebody made the contact. And at the time, I mean, of course, John also had done, the interesting things. In '66, people don't realize that, but because, of course, you had happenings and things like this, but you didn't really have performances, or it was really not as known. And in these kind of structures like this, the Salon de la Jeune Peinture was in the Museum of Modern Art, or Museum of the City of Paris, I think. And at the time, you didn't have videos, of course, you didn't have that much performance, so this felt a little bit like a performance. And in Geneva, John knew much more things that actually I myself knew, and so he was. They were doing performances, they were doing installation, and this was very early, so I knew the work and I didn't know the work. I mean, I knew that somehow he knew about everything, had done a lot of things. He had done some early abstract paintings at the time, but the way. He was larger. He was more like an artist than a painter, because they were doing these installation, and they had and of course it was an amazing place in Geneva, because it's a place you could go anytime, and John was there, and you could have tea, or there's discussion things. There was a bookstore also. They were actually doing some publication, and so I was really, I guess, happy to be asked to show there. So this is what I really remember, and also the show at the time was something pretty radical, because I put one painting which was white on white, And well, that's it. And now John's work, well, I had the feeling he had done everything that we tried to do after he had done it before, so something like that.
When was this show? Is this the painting show that I know?
No, that's
No.
that's later. In 1984, we did a show called Abstract Painting in the former space of the Gallery Écart, and that show was the result of a discussion between Olivier, another Swiss artist, Helmut Federle, and I. And it's a totally different kind of show, and it's 10 years later. It's exactly 10 years later, as a matter of fact. No, that was a one-person show of Olivier, who had this stride painting, white on white. And the gallery was not huge, but it was fairly big, and it was just an empty gallery, basically, with one white painting. If you really cared to look at this space for a moment, you'll end up seeing there was a very big canvas there. But, so that was that kind of show. And it created a real reaction, even in a small city like Geneva, like the daily papers went onto it, and there was a big discussion about that show.
Positive discussion.
Both.
Oh. Well, most people see the two of you together in the 80s when all of a sudden, I think because that that painting show you did really sort of the beginning for me to see that there was something like this kind of new geometric abstract painting. Of course, it becomes something big in the market. It's given a name. It's called Neo Geo. But that's when the two of you really start to have this kind of profile showing, I think, together in a lot of the same exhibitions. But in a sense, I mean, we've talked about this before. It really only lasted a few years. And in fact, both of you had been working for a long time before that happened. And I'm just wondering how, I mean, how you see that period as, I don't know, maybe bringing something like a new attention to, or really even starting off a kind of whole, not second part or third part, but just a new part of your career, because I think it did. Well, even if it was a kind of a made-up market thing.
It's a perception, but there's a season after a season and after a season, and it's always new and different. So it's a new focus, a new light on things. The fact is that, talking about that show, I guess the premises of it started with Olivier inviting myself, Helmut Federle, and Christoph Gossweiler in 1980, was that?
Yes.
At C-Space in New York. And in a way, all what followed, as far as we're concerned, had been rehearsed, so to say, around that time between each other.
This was interesting. Some space where I had a show by myself before asked me to create a show with Swiss artists. And of course I thought about John, and then I discovered that Helmut Federle was actually living in New York at the time, and had his other friend, Gossweiler, who was a little less known. And this is actually where I really began to really know about John's talent also, because he came to the space, he hung a table on the ceiling.
Yeah.
And you had some drawings, I think, that you made. But it was a very nice show, and at the time, because this was an interesting time, because it was when what was really happening at the time was people like Julian Schnabel and David Saleh, and kind of neo-expressionism and return to the figure, and these people came to that show. The opening was pretty, it was pretty interesting for that.
I want to talk about some of the works in the exhibition, specific works. We've seen the circle paintings in the large room, but what we see there primarily are these very large tank barricades, these sculptures which are called Toblerones. And I think everyone knows the candy, the chocolate Toblerone, but really the form comes from these anti-tank barricades that were put up in Switzerland during the Second World War. And I seem to remember, Olivier, you saying that obviously you'd both seen them. You must have seen them as children. You must have seen them after the war. They were still around because they were concrete and they didn't take them away, right? But I think you said something that once you were on a train and you looked out the window and you saw them, and it was a beginning of your thinking that had a kind of possibility as almost like a found minimal sculpture. Do you remember?
Yeah,
the idea?
I don't really remember how I came up with this idea, but I know I had to have a show in a space that had no walls, and of course this was in Switzerland, Sion, and the people who were running that space was connected with the museum. They had a museum there, but they had this other space outside the museum, and they said, oh, we can build walls and all this, but it was like, I don't know, and I can't really remember how I got interested, but of course I was also interested in American land art and in minimalism. And in Switzerland, because you have these blocks scattered in the country that you can find, there was something interesting about them being land art, but also being actually minimal structure type of structure. So, and I don't really remember how I decided to do this, but and of course they're in concrete. In fact, the name Toblerone, it's a little bit wrong because the different models of these tank blocks, and these apparently are not the one called Toblerone. There's another model which looks more like a Toblerone, which is a Toblerone. This is called beton block or something like that, concrete blocks. But it's a shape that's interesting, and of course somebody had thought about it. There's a strategic concept around these, and but when you don't know the whole information, it's just something you can look at, and people are used to them. But I got interested in that, but I don't really remember why or how it happened.
You know, there's so many different differences between the two of you, but then there are basic things that are really shared. I mean, the form of these sculptures is found just exactly in the same way as the Christmas trees in John's installation are found. And I think even to some extent, there's an aspect of abstraction or abstract painting or geometric tradition, whatever it would be, the poor paintings of John's, that in a sense that painting is that's also found. It's not a found object, but it's a kind of a found, I don't know what you would call it. It's found abstraction, and in a sense, it's almost a kind of anonymous abstraction. And I think these are two things that you share. I don't know how you feel about that idea of abstraction being found, and of course the ready-made, something that already exists that you then take over for art.
Well, finding is great, and when it's already there, it's even better. On the other hand, I would say you also point a finger on something which is quite a difference, because I think if I exploit being that lazy, whatever it is around, and don't do much about it. In the case of Olivier, I think there's really two strategies. In fact, the fact of finding something which is pre-existing is rather the exception. I think he in that sense, he's much more of a radical classic artist who builds a new world than me, who's just capitalizing on whatever is around. Mm-hmm. I'm like a decadent observer, and
yeah, but I learned a lot with John, because John looks at things, and he see some kind of structure or decor or part of a decor, and he noticed these things. So in a way, it's really somebody who helps us to look at what's around us. And of course, there's a whole Duchampian tradition who allows you to do ready-mades. But in the beginning, very much so, because I work as an assistant with some of the new realists in Paris at the time, Tinguely and Spuri. So I tended to react a little bit against the idea of the found object and this whole Duchampian discourse. But of course, I knew about it, and there's something you can't. This is what it is, and John somehow helped me to rediscover that in a way. And
I think also what's interesting is that, although in a way you opposed that way when I met you when you were younger, most people who indulge in that way loved your work. You think about the Fluxus people who always like your work. Think about a lot of young artists today who like your work. In a way, they do exactly what you were skeptic about, and it's a paradox in a way.
Really, there's people who are interested in the work. But well, I don't know. I don't know what to say.
I would think that what happens is what people see in the work is really, they see what's in front of them, but there's something about that attitude, that way about going about the work, which is what is very attractive, because also in a sense there's something very free about it, which of course is always very attractive.
Well, but I think that's the great things about contemporary art. It's like all open. You can almost do anything you want to do now. If you want to do something that makes sense, that's another, or with a certain quality that allows you to, other people to be interested, that's another thing. But it's true that there's a situation which is pretty amazing. Especially these days.
I wanted to ask also something I think that you share in common in the work, and you see it here with the circle paintings. I don't know if people realize, but over the course of, 8-9 years that you made those paintings? It's 66 to 74?
Yeah.
You made maybe more than 100 of them. And they're almost, the size is almost all identical. There are a few larger ones, but anyway, there's over 100 paintings with the same motif of the black ring in the center of the white square. And repetition, of course, John, is something that occurs in your work. Because, for example, you could say, well, we have these paintings behind us, these pour paintings. Well, you've done pour paintings before, you've done them in different sizes, but in a sense, they're all coming from the same impulse or the same idea, and so they kind of just somehow keep reproducing. Even if these are new paintings and each is different from the other, there's something about how they're also, in many ways, they're always different and they're always the same. So there's a kind of, I think, shared way of working that deals with this idea of replicating and repetition that, in a sense, means you can just go on and on and on. There's almost no need for a new, quote-unquote, idea.
No, of course, repetition is something that was certainly important for me. It doesn't, at the time you had the discourse around Andy Warhol. People were talking about repetition, about the boring thing, but also there's something. In fact, we had a show in Switzerland with John and me again. And there's also, I'm interested in abstract painting, basically. And I was, more than some American artists from my generation, more open or interested by the Greenbergian discourse. And I think in my work and John's work, there is this kind of knowledge, but there's also a criticism of the actual work that were done by the people that Clement Greenberg would support. And this is something I'm really, I'm really interested in John's work. I mean, there's this kind of that tradition, but then it turn it over somehow. It just twists that tradition. And yes?
I was going to say, well, we have seen pour paintings before, but again, when you say twisting that earlier position, you don't have in the 60s any pour paintings with, for example, glitter. So,
Can be added later.
But there's something else that you share, which really is, and if you haven't noticed it yet, it's a kind of perversity. In other words, the idea that you can be really 100% a serious artist, and at the same time, I think there's a kind of streak of indifference or perversity. And it's maybe something that makes the work really interesting.
Yeah, I think that there's several things you could say about that. The first thing, to be directly answering the glitter question, is if you wanted to be serious about it, there's a tradition about the shine in painting, which goes back from the beginning, and you have a fantastic church just next door, the Basilico, which has all those mosaics, which represent paintings in the form of mosaics. If you wanted to consider that under a classic definition, even an academical one, it is also possible. So it's always whatever you want to say about things, and you, of course, you're a master at that. You just have to decide where you want to bring it. So, yeah, so that's one thing. And what you were talking about, the seriality or the repetition and so on, and that things are the same when you do them again, yet they're not the same. It's just when you think of music in a way, when there's a script and you will play the same piece again and again, there's a different way of doing it exactly the same way, yet you know it's not the same again, without even bringing in the interpretation, the pathos or whatever. It's just things are the same as anyhow. You can try whatever you want, exactly the same. On the other hand, the context changes by the second, so they're never the same.
Right.
So basically, it's just tools which are given to us in observing the world or in producing our part to the world.
Yes, as far as I was concerned, when I was repeating the same paintings, there was also a questioning of the commodity and the market of the art, because what would give value to a painting at the time was really the fact that this piece was unique. So it's against that we were kind of working, I think.
You mentioned, I don't know when this would have been, maybe late 70s, Ben Vautier, French artist, was in the flea market in Paris, in Clignancourt, and he came across a circle painting of yours that was for sale in one of these, like somebody selling, I don't know, his junk and his old furniture and so on, and he bought it, I guess, for not very much. money, and you said that as he was paying for the painting, the guy who sold it said, "Actually, if you want more, we can make them."
Yes.
Now, my question to you is, if you encountered the painting in the flea market, I'm sure you would have bought it. But if he offered to paint some more, what would you have done?
Well, of course, anybody can try to do these paintings. But my position was that if somebody else would do the painting, it was their painting. It could be as good as the painting I would do, or even better, but it was not my painting. But I mean, here, what I think is really interesting in that show, and it just happened through the process, was that you have these paintings that were done by hand, and with somebody who tried to do something as industrial looking or as clean as possible. And then you have this process. First of all, you're going from also 2-dimension to 3-dimension, which is also a discourse that was the discourse of the 60s with minimal art, Judd, and people like that. And then you have these other pieces who I was really happy because they were done here, and I think they're perfect. I don't know how they could be done better, but you can feel that they have this kind of industrial feeling. And I think there is this kind of, dialogue between these two different works. And I guess with John, I mean, the same thing happened also a little bit like that, because you have the background and you have the work in front of the back. And I think this is an interesting situation, I mean, to me.
One thing we see here also in the exhibition is how John is kind of staging the room or the paintings, or the room and the paintings, because you don't see a painting necessarily just on a white wall. It's over a wall painting, or if it's over, there's this material in the other room where you create the whole backdrop. So it's more involved, it seems, than ever in an installation or a staging of the work. And because in fact, if someone were to look at a catalog of your work, as we get closer to this time, we can see that you're really loading it up more and more and more, and with lights and with objects and so on. It just seems something like this direction that you've been going towards in recent years. And you even say things like it's never enough, when of course it's a kind of, and you did that show, which was great, the Pudding Overdose, but this idea of the never enough and the OD, and really stimulating the whole space, as opposed to the more classical way that, say, Olivier would present his work. Can you talk about that kind of building up the staging of the work?
Well, the truth is, it's in a way a side effect. I think when you do a very minimal installation or a very classical one, you're using tools which exist, which are staging it as much. If you go now at the Museum of Paintings, all the paintings are staged in a way or another, according to a script and so on. You never have a situation which is given in an exhibition situation which is not staged. It's just that since there's the opportunity of doing it, you do it more or less. But if you take the case of Olivier, who would be someone maybe a bit more moral about it, less perverse, because I'm supposed to be perverse, although I'm the shyest person in the world and I behave very well. Think about it. The most staged piece or room in this show is actually Olivier's, where his paintings are blocked by anti-tank sculptures. And so it's always, you have different ways of seeing it. And what's interesting is that there's many side effects, and these side effects changes depending on the mood, the room temperature, what you've eaten, and what you know about the arch that we didn't visit a minute ago, or whatever,
Of course, I mean, we all know that every work is staged, and especially when you talk about a museum or a one-person exhibition. But what I was getting at, what I'm maybe more interested in, is that in your staging, you embrace, say, things that maybe are in bad taste. It's a little cheap and shiny, and and you've done that more and more. But in a sense, what you've done is you've taken these kind of cheap materials or cheap, flashy surfaces, and you bring up the question of beauty, because actually the installations they're beautiful. But you're getting to that kind of from this indirection, or from this kind of what we might call bad, quote unquote, bad taste, which for you is there's nothing. I mean, it's all available in a sense.
Yeah, well, no one's perfect, but I mean, there's two ways of looking at it, and this discussion, if you take it back to the turn of the century, I mean, the former century, with the Werkstätters and arts and craft people, they handle it in a very direct way and in a very responsible way, where actually taste was an issue and it was used in a very progressive way, and they sort of knew what taste was. I'm not sure today we still know what taste is, as a matter of fact. It's sort of course, easy to say a silver Christmas tree is so-so, and then you stack them up and you put them in a museum and they're no more so-so. And you just don't know why. You believe you would know because you just put people in the... you force people to look at them in a different way because in a way they're looking at them like they would be looking at the Madonna, which is basically the same story as Christmas trees.
Well, there's an aspect of repetition that relates directly to that. If you took, because we know you take something, common object, and you bring it into a gallery or a museum, and people look at it in a different way, especially if you have the lights on it, or maybe there's a pedestal or something. They think, well, it's in an art context, it's art. But if you brought one silver Christmas tree, it would be the thing that it actually is, which is kind of tacky. But you pile a lot of them on together, and it becomes something else. It gains a kind of momentum as a larger object.
It's true and not true, because I'm not sure if I had not, just put one Christmas tree, somehow the tackiness would have again been changed into something else. I think the taste level problem is much more. I mean, the extremes of the taste problem are much more are much better addressed by people who actually, in a strong way, indulge in bad taste, like say Paul McCarthy or something like that. And the same effect at the end happens also in a very different way, because it's more about, what saves me is that I would love to have no body. There's nothing bodily about it. There's no expression. There's no sweat. I mean, some people sweat in putting up my pieces. I'm sorry about that. But I mean, in a way, it's immune. And taste, immune, sort of works in a fairly distanciated way. But the people who address that, and we've known a lot, like the Dieter Roth in Switzerland or the Hermann Nietzsche or whatever, people who really do terrible things in front of an audience, it's another problem. And it's interesting to see that nevertheless turns out to be aesthetically perfectly acceptable or revered and beautiful. There is a beauty to that. So there's a big territory.
I have a question for Olivier, but based on something, John, you said to me once in an interview. I was talking about bad painting, and you said, well, isn't there something bad about every painting? Something like that. I don't know if you remember that. Isn't there something bad about every painting? Olivier?
When you think all paintings are bad? I don't think so. I think they're problematic. But I think it's beyond good and bad.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to know what good and bad is. But I remember you telling me long ago, and that again addresses a bit of my problematic, because I just don't behave in the way I should, knowing what you said, and which I think was correct, is that when you somehow correct me in how you told me, but once you told me, oh, when you do a painting and you bring in the canvas and it's nice, it's perfect, and then you add the grounding and it's not so good anymore, and then you add a coat of painting, it's getting a bit, I mean, there's a decay thing. The closer you get to the result, the further you are.
First, of course, we try to do good exhibitions, and we also try to do good paintings. But of course, I think for me, I mean, I do paintings because I cannot do something else. And I really feel a little bit, difficult. And you show these things to people and you impose something. And I guess at one point I must have said something like, if there's no painting, it's even better. I mean, an empty gallery is the best show we can have. It has been done. and then a monochrome painting is better than... And I stop at a certain point. I think abstract painting is good, and of course, it gets worse when it's figurative painting.
I agree. There's a quote that I like. I haven't read the book yet. It hasn't come out in this country, but there's a biography of Marky Smith from The Fall, and he says at one point, if you're going to play out of tune properly. And I think that's something else that maybe links the two of you. I think you both paint out of tune, but properly. I don't know how you can react to that.
John is out of tune. I try to.
No, I mean, for example, you might do something like, and again, it really goes directly back to an attitude. You know, you might go into the studio and you might notice in the corner there's a can and some leftover paint, and you decide to make a painting. In other words, your decision, your starting point to make a painting isn't like, I have to make this painting. You saw some paint that was left over and you wanted to use it. I think that that's a very particular attitude for a painter, and unusual, or not. John?
Both. The tuning thing is fun because when you think of it, the way people have tuned instruments through ages has changed, and we don't know exactly why. It's if you tune in instruments like you would have tuned in let's say the 19th century or the 18th century or something, it's totally tuned differently, depending on an instrument, of course. Why that, for instance? And it goes back to the correctness, and I think it's interesting to think that, you know, I was talking about being clean. There's an interesting thing about taste, again, is that there is a cult of the bad behavior, and I think today it's very, as a matter of fact, staged, the bad behavior. And as a matter of fact, I always had a problem with bad behavior. I never behaved well at school, but in a very shy way, and I did nothing outrageous. I always had problems. Many friends who did a lot of outrageous things got away with it, and in fact were admired for it. When there was this new geometric kind of thing going on, and I would go to Germany and see my friends there, they were very annoyed because in those days, I was a little bit better than now. I didn't drink, I didn't eat meat or whatever, and they thought that I was doing it all wrong, and it was provocative because being artists, of course, they were basically drunk. And if you think of taste, it is role models in a way, brought to another level. And at one point or another, you are going to make an operatic work around it. You'll give value. But it's a decision of whomever, you know, you can decide this or that, and it changes very fast. And the good thing about today, it's instant. It goes very quickly. The challenge is you don't know what to do with it.
I want to mention also, I think it's quite interesting in the context of larger show of your work, that in the front room, front gallery, is an installation which was based on kind of ongoing performance and making of the work throughout the opening last night by Arakawa. And you know, you said the first encounter you had with Olivier's work was in the context of this paintings being made in the opening of this Salon of Young Painters. And then, of course, you're coming out early in your work from Fluxus and from these kind of situations where things are being made, in a sense, on the spot or improvisationally, and also involving a kind of performative aspect. So I think it's interesting to have this room as part of, you know, the whole exhibition that opened last night.
But we got a little older.
And it's also, it's creeping a little over the wall into
I
your
saw that. And
your
I'm
gallery.
happy about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's also an ongoing situation, because I think you're going to have, during our exhibition, other installations and performances.
I'm just wondering if there's, we should open it up for any questions anyone might have for the artists. I think there's a mic, if you want to. You can talk. Okay.
How did you have to relocate to Tucson, and what effect on your art, if any?
Well, I just happened to get married with somebody from there. So, but also at the time there was the idea to take a little distance with New York. I guess when I came to New York, I mean, I was born in Switzerland, but then I went to Paris very quickly, and then went to New York, and I had the feeling that really things were happening in New York, so that's where you had to be. And then after some years, it was kind of interesting to take this kind of distance. In fact, I had a lot of kind of admiration for John also, because he was born in Geneva and stayed in Geneva and was able to do his work from there, and was able to, you know, being shown all over the world, but I mean, really staying in the same place, as I had to move from place to place. But yeah, that's the answer.
Other questions? Yes.
Contemporary Art Musuem St. Louis and the little bit we've seen of our city? Or have you not seen it?
You've seen everything, John, by now.
No, I saw very little. I really did a little tour yesterday. It's great. I think Olivier is talking about relocating here, and and I feel at home here because I feel fairly at home on this planet. Though I would like to relocate on other planets, but that's a struggle. No, it's a great place, and people have been extremely responsive and nice and directly interested. So you feel that a lot. And you feel that also, but I guess it's the kind of situation you find in cities which have this kind of status, is when you go around, people are curious and they want to know what you do. And when you tell them a little hint of something, they come up with lots of stories, and you come up with something. So it's very nice in that way. Of course, the other frustration is that you speed through a city and you see that little tip of it and you don't know much about it. And I saw a couple of sites which were really amazing, like the Sullivan Wainwright tomb at the Bellefontaine or the Basilica I was talking about and things like that, which are amazing places that people don't know about. I mean, one should be much more aware of those sites. And the operation here is fantastic. It just first, it wasn't. I mean, we of course want to thank everyone here to inviting us to show here. But it was a beautiful experience because it was very easy, it was very welcoming, and it was just done perfectly. As a matter of fact, you didn't even need us. I mean, you could have. so it was very agreeable.
But there's an interesting situation, in fact, in Missouri, because it's really in the middle of America, and you have this east-west situation. I guess, I don't know, Kansas City is the west, and St. Louis might be still the east, which I think is a really interesting situation.
Other questions? Yes.
Congratulations on the installation. Absolutely beautiful, and the relationship between both of your works, I think, is really incredible. A lot of things are just striking me as I'm sitting here, like the use of circles in the paintings that is, contrasted with the use of circles here in this room, and the matte quality of the sculptures in the other room versus the shininess of John's work, and there's this beautiful dialogue. But I'm curious, Olivier, what is where does this shape come from? What is this shape to you? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so I guess we mentioned something, but the shape itself comes from,
Tony Smith.
well, could have, but it's not. It just happened that in Switzerland, no, but I'm sure that's the reason I noticed it, but in Switzerland you have these, if some people of you have been in Switzerland, I mean, you see them or you don't, but during the last war, the army built these blocks of concrete in the landscape, and they were supposed to block tanks, German tanks would come in. And they're still there because they're done in concrete and it's too expensive to get rid of them. And that's how I found them. But John is correct. I mean, it's a weird shape to begin with. It's not clear. Some people have studies, and I guess if tanks go up on these, they get off balance or something like that. So they're able to block certain parts of that. And in fact, even, the Swiss army sell their bunkers because they don't need them. And I knew somebody who had this contact, and I asked if I could buy some of these blocks, the actual blocks. And in fact, you can buy the land from the army. It's a complicated process. But yeah, there's the weird shape. And in fact, yeah, when I wanted to block them, I asked this contact if I could see a map to see where they were in Switzerland, to choose some. And they said, oh no, we cannot show you that because there's still some kind of...
Questions? Anyone else? No one else? Well,
1, 2, 3.
thanks again for coming, and thanks Anthony and everyone here for organizing this, and enjoy the show.
Thank you.